What I list out.
I'm laughing because
Yeah, you have a list.
I have my list for today every day right now. Man, it's just you know, it does.
Priority.
Yeah, but week and I would have
Setting the timer, like, okay, I'm only giving myself an hour, I'm only giving myself an X amount of time.
also just like only giving myself an X amount of time to do like a smaller activities. Right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
and then like again, I'll try and like set a like different goals that I'm doing for like a bigger like this thing.
Okay,
Everyone eating in there?
almost.
Yeah, I know. I'm right there with you if it makes you feel any better. And I was sharing, I feel like I'm getting sick. My kids have been sick for like a week. And they're so awful at keeping their germs to themselves, like horrible. They just like cough on their hands and then touch everything. And then they want hugs and like, you know, I'm like, oh no, get away from me. I don't have time right now. All right. So I'm gonna stay way back here. But I can feel it. So I'm hoping it doesn't get too much worse. But we're obviously really, really close. I know that this is probably like the most overwhelming next week and a half. But hang in there, right? It's so close to being done. We have today and Monday. Right, that's all that we have together, right? So today what we'll do is we'll wrap up on chapter 15. We just have a couple of slides left. And then we're gonna look at chapter 16, which is really interesting. We're gonna do a little like group project related to some of these famous cases of insanity, which hopefully will be really interesting to do. I have a little like participation homework assignment for you that I'm gonna give you. But other than that, our exam is next week. Everything's kind of coming to the end here. I graded like 2/3 of your papers. I was really proud of myself. I know you just turned them in, so a lot of you have your grades up. What I've read so far have been amazing, really, really well done. Those of you that I haven't graded, I will get to them really soon, but I've graded the vast majority of them. So what that means is at this point, you pretty much have most of your grades set. Okay, so what we have left are 2 participations. One is the not guilty by reason of insanity, like activity we're gonna do. Which will start today and finish Monday. And the other is this little homework assignment that I'm gonna give you. And then the exam. Okay, so you can kind of figure out what you need to get on the exam. You can look at your grade and see where you're at. But we're really close. So hang in there. I'm telling that to myself and to you, right? We'll get there. Are there any questions about any like of the schedule stuff? When Monday is our last day. So Wednesday, we have our exam, but it's on Canvas. And it's just like the first 2. It's not cumulative. It's just a 3rd test. And that is kind of all we have. Well, no, Monday, I'll have very little to write up there. It's so sad, right? I get sad at the end. I'm going to miss all of you, right? We spend so much time together. 18 weeks is a long time to spend with people. I'm a sentimental person. So. Any questions? Are we feeling okay? Okay. All right. So let's jump back into this for a minute, and then we'll get to what I think is kind of a fun last chapter very, very soon here, after we finish kind of talking about these different neurocognitive disorders. So we went through all these last time. What we have left are kind of interventions and treatments and prevention, right? So some things that you can do to help. When it comes to neurocognitive disorders, catching them early and making preventative efforts are huge. Okay, so these are disorders of aging. So to some degree, you can't stop them if they're going to happen, but you can delay them for a very long time. And what we see is that a lot of the research that we're doing right now is really promising. And I was mentioning that to you last time. This is such a huge area of investigation because it affects 1 in 10 people over the age of 65. So what we're doing is a lot of tests with different medications, different administrations of drugs. We've been doing a lot of stem cell research. So Obama lifted the ban on stem cell research years back. It was like 2000, trying to remember the year. The year doesn't matter, but it was 2009, right? He lifted the ban on stem cell research, which has made huge leaps for us in looking at like, how can we maybe use that in some way to regenerate some of the cells that are dying off in people who have these disorders. So we're doing a lot of stuff with medications, with stem cell research, with blood sugar levels, like I mentioned before. So hopefully we are getting closer and closer and closer. But Sadly, the way that it works right now is if somebody's diagnosed with one of these, we tend to give them medication for the first few years. And that can really slow things down. But there tends to hit a point where the medications don't work anymore. And at that point, it's just making that person comfortable, learning to like live with it and finding strategies to live with it. A lot of stuff related to like acetylcholine and dopamine in those early stages. But hopefully, again, because of the amount of research, hopefully we're getting closer and closer to something. We're also getting better at like screening methods. So a couple of years ago, they came out with a test that you can take a blood test to see how likely you are to get like Alzheimer's, for example, or Lewy body dementia. They're really inaccurate right now. So people are getting a lot of false positives and false negatives. So they're not very popular, but I again imagine that will also get better as we move into the future. So lots of things being done, still kind of a long way to go. So what you can do, there are some things that you can do, and these are like generally good things across the board, but they're really helpful in terms of like delaying or pushing back stuff like these neurocognitive disorders. So 6 pillars of like a brain healthy lifestyle. So taking care of your body and your brain throughout your life, but especially as you get older, is really, really important. So exercise. When you exercise, you increase blood flow and oxygen, which is really good for your brain. It keeps your heart healthy. There's a lot of correlation between blood pressure and heart health and some of these neurocognitive disorders. Diet is also another really big one. And this is one that is gaining a lot of traction. Like, so people eating smaller meals, eating across the rainbow, like more of like a Mediterranean diet, a lot of like very like omega-3 fatty like acids and so on. There's a lot of things related to diet that we're trying to do, reducing like all those refined sugars. So diet and exercise, which we all know we're supposed to do anyway, right? But like these are important for brain health. Keeping your mind active is another one, right? So especially as you get older, and you're all doing this now, right? You're here, you're in school, you're working, you're reading, you're pushing your mind. But as you get older, continuing to do this, playing like games, right? And doing little things that push your mind and push your brain. Really interesting one too, following the road less traveled. This is one that's gained a little bit of like traction as well. We tend to be creatures of habit, like just in where you sit, how you get to places, the things that you do. Break your habits every now and then. You form new pathways in the brain when you do that. I don't know about you, but I drive the same way to school every day. I walk the same way to this class in my office every day. Like take a different route one day, right? It forms new pathways in the brain. It pushes you a little bit. Doing things like that, thinking about the who, what, where, when, why, and all that. That's the 5 W's. So kind of pushing your mind a little bit can be really helpful. Another really important one is sleep. Sleep is so crucial for your brain health. And I know right now that's like probably one of the hardest things to do is to get enough sleep and have time for it. But really getting good sleep, managing your stress, and being socially active. That's another really big protective factor in people who are older. Having people that you interact with and like have a social life with can also be really like cushioning for your brain. So taking care of yourself can go a long way. My partner's grandma lived all the way to 101, I want to say, and mine lived to 102. So some longevity, right? And in our grandmas, at least, not our grandpas. Both of our grandpas died very young, but our grandmas lived a long time. So we'll see what happens. But both of them so sharp all the way to the end, like very active, very like doing a lot of these things, and it really paid off, right? And it doesn't always work that way, but the more you do to protect yourself, the better off you tend to be for longer. Yeah. Oh, I thought that was right. So again, taking care of yourself, taking care of your health, your brain, maybe not this week, that's hard to do, but trying to find ways to do those things as much as you can will go a long, long way. Right? All right. Any like other like stories or thoughts or comments or questions, anything else for chapter 15 before we move on? We're really going to our last set of slides. That's wild, right? Last slides, chapter 16. Can I go see how many times I can say last today? Let's see. I'll say it a lot on Monday. I'll save it for Monday. I'll save it for the last class. All right, so chapter 16. This one we'll look at forensic psychology. Anyone thinking of going into something with forensic psychology, maybe? We got a few people and some maybes. really, really interesting branch of abnormal psych. So we're looking at the intersections here between the law and psychology. And this affects us in two different ways. And we'll talk about both sides of the coin. We'll focus on one side more today, and then the other one more next time. But with this one, we're looking at, again, how does psychology affect the law? And how does the law affect psychology? So when anyone commits a crime, psychology can have a role in how we try them and what verdicts we give them and so on. And anyone who practices psychology is also governed by legal principles and ethical principles. So they kind of have this two sides of the coin that we're going to look at, starting with how psychology affects the law. Now, I'm obviously not a lawyer, and this gets very tricky, very complicated, very case by case, but we can look at some of the common verdicts that show up, and then we'll look at some famous cases of people who've had this be part of their like legal proceedings in some way. So I have a little video that I want to start with, and it kind of talks about some of the common verdicts and then mention a few people that we'll come back to because there's quite a few people this has affected. But I think it's a good introduction because this can be a little confusing because there's a lot of legal stuff going on here. Helpful overview. And there's so many more cases even than the ones that were mentioned in there. But I love that they give you kind of an overview of the idea of insanity, the different tests that are used for it, and how difficult it is to get this plea. It's a very difficult verdict to be granted. So when somebody commits a crime and they're going to go through a legal proceeding for it, what we do is we go through this whole process of evaluating their state of mind. Now, if they have a mental illness, that's not enough to necessarily be considered for this verdict of insanity. But if it meets a couple of criteria, then maybe. Okay, so this whole process that we're talking about is the idea of criminal commitment, right? Is somebody stable enough to go through trial? Should they be sent to a prison or should they be sent to a psychiatric facility? And it depends on a lot of different factors. So what we're trying to determine right off the bat is this person sane or insane? Now, again, the term insanity is not a mental illness, right? It is a legal verdict, right? Or a legal term. And what this means, like the kind of broad definition, because it varies a little bit from state to state, as they just talked about, is at the time of committing a crime. So at the time of the crime itself, because of a mental disorder, so we have two things already: crime, like the time you committed it, mental disorder, a person did not know right from wrong or could not resist an uncontrollable impulse to act. So they didn't know right from wrong. They couldn't control themselves. They gave into an impulse at the time of committing a crime. So if that is found to be true, a person can plead not guilty by reason of insanity. So they're saying, I should not be found guilty because at the time of the crime, I couldn't appreciate right from wrong. I didn't know what I was doing. I was legally insane. Now that is granted like less than 1% of the time. It's very, very difficult. This is something that's evaluated by multiple tests, by multiple psychologists and psychiatrists, and featured in a lot of like TV shows and movies, right, where we're trying to evaluate this. It's often people who have schizophrenia, right? That's the most common diagnosis that somebody would have because they're psychotic, right? So they have hallucinations and delusions, which make it hard to know what's real and what isn't. But if somebody's found insane, not guilty by reason of insanity, they would go to a psychiatric facility instead of prison, right? And it might be that they spend their whole life there, or they spend months or years there until they're better. And sometimes they even go back and stand trial after they've gotten better, right? Or spend the rest of their life there. That happens sometimes too. So a lot of people say this isn't fair, right? That people are getting away with something because of a mental illness. But again, very few people are actually granted this plea. A lot of people try. People often even try to fake it. One of the things that people have done a lot is say, I had another personality and that personality committed the murder, right? Like saying they have dissociative identity disorder, but it falls through. It's very difficult to fake and fake consistently. And so they oftentimes are discovered during the trial. So this is one verdict that people can do, but it's very, very rarely granted. What's much more common is to find somebody guilty, but mentally ill. Okay, yes, you have a mental illness. Yes, it should be part of like our like judgment, but it wasn't enough for us to say you are not guilty or insane, right? So oftentimes what this means is you go to jail, but you receive treatment in jail. And that's often the case anyway, that you would receive treatment there. It's mandated that if you have mental illness, you have the right to treatment in like a facility. So guilty but mentally ill happens a lot. Yes, you had this disorder, but you're still going to jail. You're still guilty. The other way this can show up is we can get guilty with diminished capacity. Okay, so your mental illness should be taken into consideration, and we're going to find you guilty of a lesser like crime. So instead of first-degree murder, it's manslaughter. So you get a lesser verdict, less time in jail because of your mental illness, but you're still guilty and you still go to jail. So these two happen quite a bit more, right? Guilty but mentally ill, or guilty with a diminished capacity. So we find you guilty of a lesser sentence, a lesser verdict is granted, and you still go to jail. Are there any like thoughts or questions about those three? Those are kind of the three that have to do with insanity at the time of the crime. Anything for the moment? There's one more, but yeah.
So you say that schizophrenics are the most popular, but why would it be ASPD?
So that one, like, so obviously that is going to give you like, you couldn't experience empathy, but you might still know right from wrong with that one, right? So that one is sometimes part of it, but typically it doesn't interfere with your sense of reality. It just interferes with your like moral compass, which isn't enough to say that you didn't know right from wrong, that you weren't aware of what you were doing. So that might be taken into consideration, but it's not enough for you to typically not be aware of what you're doing. You just don't feel that guilt or empathy, but that's not enough to qualify for like a not guilty verdict, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, if that was the case with every serial.
Right.
It would be like, oh,
Yeah.
or Dara is probably like.
Right.
Whole point was in that.
Yeah, because a lot of serial killers have antisocial personality disorder, right? Like there's a very high correlation there. And it doesn't affect your kind of awareness of what was right and wrong, just your reaction to what's right and wrong, if that is. So it's a kind of a different level, but it's a great question, right? And it's definitely something that's present a lot for people who commit this. The other thing that can happen is sometimes the crime itself or something that happens after the crime can make it where somebody isn't able to defend themselves, right? So they're found incompetent to stand trial. So maybe the crime itself caused them to snap, or something after the crime and the reaction to it made them mentally unstable. If somebody's found mentally incompetent to stand trial, they go to a psychiatric facility until they're better, and then they're released and then they stand trial like normal. Now, they might not ever get better. Like Ed Dean, for example, is one of the people we'll talk about. The Wisconsin grave robber, super scary guy. He was found mentally incompetent to stand trial and went to a psychiatric facility basically for like most of the rest of his life. So sometimes when this happens, people never get out. And so this one is kind of like after the crime. So after the crime, somebody is no longer able to defend themselves. They don't understand the cause, or I'm sorry, the charges being brought against them. And so they're found mentally incompetent to stand trial. So those are the big verdicts that people can have. The idea with all of these is someone has a mental illness that impaired them enough that they shouldn't be treated the same as somebody who didn't have that mental illness and knew right from wrong. But very slippery slope, right? And very difficult to prove. Yeah.
For a person who did in fact commit a crime was like had a learning disability where their mind is like
Yeah.
years of age, their mind is like 6 years old, and they were near a weapon, and let's say like the situation is like they did something, would they more likely get incompetence to stand trial, or would they be?
It depends. So if it was
during prison.
So it would depend on whether or not, like, so as like a global disability that impaired their ability. So like Arnie, for example, right? Or like if we run with him, since we just watched that film, right? It might be that he's tried as a child rather than an adult. That's one way that could happen. Or that he is found like guilty with a diminished capacity is more common. I won't say that it's impossible, sorry, for somebody to have something other than schizophrenia. It's just like the most common. So it could be that someone didn't have the mental capacity to understand. We also see a lot of cases of abuse being the case as well, which you'll see in a minute when we talk about the examples. Abuse is another one that we see a lot, like leading to that verdict as well. So let's look at some famous people. And this is a really scary slide of people, right? Let me put them all up here. Okay, people you don't want to run into, right? So let's look at these people for just, I'm just gonna give you a tiny bit because you're gonna give me more, right? We're gonna do a little activity looking at these people, but let me give you a preview of each one of them. So starting at the top, right? Andrea Yates had postpartum psychosis and she drowned her 5 children in the bathtub, right? Killing all 5 of them because she thought they weren't developing properly, right? Very, very religious, felt that they weren't developing, drowned and killed all 5 of her children. That's one person. Jeffrey Dahmer, who was brought up in the film, killed 15 to 17 young men, cutting his victims into pieces. He was found guilty, right, beaten to death by an inmate, but one of the most brutal serial killers of all time. Ed Gein, I mentioned him a moment ago. Ed Gein is a murderer and grave robber from Wisconsin. There's a lot of Wisconsin folks up here. You got to be careful, right? My parents live in, or my mom lives in Wisconsin. And I'm like, ooh, scary place to be, right? Lots of serial killers in Wisconsin. But he would remove the skin of his victims and sew their body parts together into trophies and furniture. He inspired quite a few movies, right? And I'll leave that in case somebody picks him. John Wayne Gacy, the clown killer. He committed a lot of sodomy and murdered 30 plus boys who were buried in the crawl space beneath his house. Let's see who's next. We got John Hinckley Jr. up at the top. He tried to assassinate President Reagan. And they talked about him in the little clip. He wrote a letter to actress Jodie Foster and did the whole thing to try and impress her. Really like bizarre behavior. David Berkowitz was the son of Sam Killer in New York who killed 6 victims and wounded several others in some shootings. Underneath that, we have Kenneth Bianchi, the Hillside Strangler. He kidnapped and sexually assaulted quite a few women. Francine Hughes at the bottom set her husband on fire while he was sleeping as a result of years of sexual and emotional abuse. Next to them, or next to her, 2 kind of a newer example, Anissa Ware and Morgan Geyser, 2 12-year-olds who stabbed another girl 19 times to impress a fictional character named Slenderman from a creepypasta website, kind of a newer case. Above that, Gypsy Rose Blanchard and Nicholas Godejohn, having to do a lot with Munchausen's, right, believing to be ill for years and years and years, conspiring together to kill her mother. We also have Mark David Chapman, who assassinated John Lennon and afterward remained at the scene reading Catcher in the Rye when they arrested him. Lorena Bobbitt, famous for cutting off her husband's penis, throwing it out a window after years of sexual and emotional abuse. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, sent quite a few bombs through the mail, trying to blow up quite a few things. Very political, very intelligent guy, sent these packages nationwide. And then James Holmes, the Colorado Joker killer, he went into a movie theater in Colorado and shot and killed quite a few people dressed up as the Joker during a Batman screening. I went to that movie theater 3 days before he did that. That exact movie theater, like, oh, it creeps me out to this day. 3 days before, I didn't see Batman, but 3 days before, I was living in Colorado and we went there, and then it was closed after that. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, really interesting, right? He had a big impact. I imagine there's going to be something too from Minecraft, right? You're going to be able to not going to be able to yell chicken jockey in a theater. 4 times I've seen that stupid movie. 4 times. Yeah.
He started the trend, I think, like years ago where Halloween happened, everybody was scared to go out because there was like the clowns like going on. Like I feel like when I was like in middle school, everyone was like, I'm not trick-or-treating, clowns are gonna come and attack us and like attack and kill us.
I don't know. I mean, it was
year where-
specifically the Joker, but like there might be some overlap there. It's hard to
I
say.
don't know, I had this a year where everyone was like, we're not going out because someone's gonna kill us. And
Yeah.
it was like a big thing and it's been happening.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if that's related to him, but he definitely, led to a lot of fear of going to like specifically that movie back when it happened, which was a while ago at this point, but still. So there are more, but these are some of the most famous ones that definitely involve like an insanity verdict in some way. So what I want you to do is we're going to spend the rest of our time today. I'm going to give you the rest of the time. So this isn't homework. I don't want to give you more homework because I already have a short homework assignment for you. So I don't want to give you any more. What I'm going to have you do is get into groups of like 4 to 5 people. And you're gonna pick one of these people or pairs of people, and you're gonna do a little bit of research on them. So I'm gonna give you each a little sheet that you're gonna write your names on. And what I want you to do as a group is prepare like one, maybe 2 slides, like at the most, that you can put up when you present on this person next class. So today what I'm gonna do is give you the rest of the time to do your research, make a slide. It could just be a picture of them and their name, or it could be text if that helps you, like whatever's gonna help you. But next class, as a group, and you can divide it up however you would like, you're gonna present a little bit on your person, just like 2 minutes. Tell us a little bit about them. What crimes did they commit? What were their verdicts and where are they now? And any other interesting information. Some of them have some kind of really like random interesting things. So look them up, find that out. But what I'll do is once you have a person you want, raise your hand and I'll come around, and we're not gonna have any overlap. So as soon as someone's taken, they're taken. But I'll give each one of you this sheet. It has all the directions and then a place for your names. And then I'm gonna give you the rest of our time. If you finish early, you're welcome to go. But I don't want this to be homework. So please take advantage of the time. I'll be wandering around and can help. But find like 4 to 5 people. Go ahead and get together. And when you know who you want, let me know and I'll come around and that person will be yours. So as soon as you know, let me know.
Yeah.
That's totally fine.
Yeah.
What guy was?
Yeah, let's do these questions.
I have a personal request to do who needs some winer and because I learned about them like recently.
Yeah, let's wait here.
You can always like, oh, I don't require. Oh,
Yeah, I think that would be good.
because they're recent.
There was like.
I remember, like, I feel like I think about that. Taking this class like 2 years ago. I was thinking about it out of interest.
Yeah, like next door, that's the go, it's like 2 hours or something. And he says.
Yeah.
What do you do? And then, oh my God, how we were here.
I'm gonna make a slide to share. Okay, never mind. Never mind, she got her.
Okay. Making the slide.
She has her.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Okay, maybe sit. You guys gotta know what.
It's like, give a brief background, what crimes did they commit, describe those able to things.
Okay.
That would be easily fine, a quick summary.
And it should only be like 3 to 4 minutes in length, so it shouldn't be like.
Let me start. So crazy that I remember learning about this, like, out of the random search I did. So interesting. That's definitely. I like last checked.
Like my Instagram has someone was like, so it was like,
Not this cringy, not as fast as cringy.
It has early signs that send your friend down that wood. And it was that and I feel that and
like sacrifice something of like kill somebody in order to get invited back to this action. So they wanted to kill someone so that they could like get a doctor.
yeah, it's essentially like to prove that he was real, like to the.
Because they find little kids, like they find pedestals. So they were like,
Does everybody have someone that wants that?
So let's do, I think, start with the background.
Yeah.
maybe about.
We need a lot of context.
Yeah.